Well, you get a little bit of extra time, and people are not bothering you, and you can get a lot of work done if you put your mind to it. The hard part is keeping the story in your head, because you know you can only go for 45 minutes or an hour at a time, and picking up right where you left off was difficult. But what I found was I took pretty much the same ferry every morning and the same one every evening, and round about the time where it was getting to be time to go over to the boat, my brain would start kicking into gear, and I would simply have to think, okay, Mike and Rosie are in a certain place, and they're going to start talking about this, and I would pick up right where I left off.
So were you really able to compartmentalize your day? So you got off the ferry and switched into legal mode, and then you got out of the office and switched back into writing mode?
Yeah, I did. I got pretty good at it. If you write at the same time every day, which I did, and I still do, your body and your brain sort of acclimates to that. And when it's time to write, your brain starts working on the book again. And so yeah, I was able to pretty much put the legal work aside for at least 45 minutes at a time, going back and forth across the bay. And when I started writing my first book, our twins were little. They're 11 years old now, but they were only 3 at the time. And so I would go home and we'd put the kids to bed, and then I would start again a little bit late at night until I got tired. But most of these books, at least the early books, got done on the ferry.
So were you writing on spec?
Pardon me?
Were you writing your first book, Extenuating Circumstances, just for the fun of it?
Oh, yeah, it was completely on spec. I'd always wanted to write a novel. Since I was in high school, it's just sort of hot-wired into my psyche that I wanted to try this, and I wanted to try to finish a novel by the time I was 40. That was all I had going. And I started in earnest in 1995 when I was 37, and I finished the book 3 days before my 40th birthday, knowing full well that the chances of selling a novel are not very good, but it still happened. I sold the book about 3 months later and actually had a 2-book deal for the first 2 books. But it was completely out of the blue. It was not something, my background, I studied accounting in college. I'm a corporate and securities attorney. So in some respects, I'm somewhat uniquely unqualified to write murder mysteries and books about murder trials.
Criminal defense work.
Criminal defense work.
How much can you know?
That's right. And I'm lucky because I know a bunch of police officers and now judges and prosecutors, and they give me a lot of help in putting the stories together.
Well, I asked you about whether you'd written Extenuating Circumstances and spec, because basically it's a novel about a really corrupt law firm, and it could have been a book that you were inspired to write, by your own circumstances, but I think you're still with the same law firm, so probably not. Yeah,
actually, I had the idea for writing a book about a murder in a big law firm probably 10 years before I ever started writing Special Circumstances. And
I keep calling it Extenuating? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Beg your pardon, that's a different.
Right. The first book is Special Circumstances, and the second one is Incriminating Evidence.
And then we get to Criminal Intent. Well, I beg your pardon.
Right. No, not a problem. But I did have the idea for writing, just sort of broad brush, a book about a murder in a big law firm set in San Francisco. And the idea for that really came from the thought that I would write about what I knew, and I know about big law firms, and I know about San Francisco. And it all sort of sprang from that point. I had no original intention of writing a series, and these books are a series with continuing characters. I just wanted to see if I could put some chapters together and write a good piece of fiction. And once I got started, I kept going. In 1993, something happened at our old law firm. I'm no longer with the Pettit and Martin firm where we worked back then, but we had a very serious event there that I think we've talked about on occasion. Our law firm was in the 101 California building in San Francisco, in downtown San Francisco, and 10 years ago, July, one of our former clients came into the firm. He was armed with Uzis and pistols, and it was a horrific event, and he killed 8 people in our firm that day, and then he killed himself. And it was one of those horrific, tragic events that does happen from time to time, unfortunately.
Going postal, but going legal, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we closed the firm 2 years later. I'm now with a larger firm called Shepard, Mullen, Richter, and Hampton, where most of the Pettit people went. But it was in 1995 when we closed the Pettit firm and moved over to the Shepard firm when I started to think about writing the novel that I had always thought about writing but wasn't sure I would ever get around to doing. And it was one of those events that, you know, for a lot of people, it just changed our perspectives on a lot of things. And a lot of us thought about what we really were interested in doing and sort of things we had put off for a period of time. And I'd always wanted to write a novel, so.
Well, I can see that, but there's a real edge to Special Circumstances. I mean, you know, one of the specialties that I have as a bookseller at the Poison Pen is spotting first novels of, you know, really promising authors. I mean, and I have to say, over the years, I've been pretty good. I mean, I don't miss very many successful career starts. Every once in a while, but not too often. And I was really impressed, as you know, because we sent you boatloads of them to sign with the book. But one of the reasons I liked it is there seemed to be a certain edge or rage or something, which is, you know, which one could read as maybe outrage at something going on in the firm. But now that I am reminded of this event, maybe is sort of a carryover, really, from how you all felt about this dreadful, I mean, the rage isn't really about the law firm, but rather about, you know, the murders that were visited on you, sort of transmuted.
Yeah, I think there was certainly an element of that. I know that I did have in mind very early on what I wanted the book to sound like, what I wanted the narrator to sound like, and I wanted to give the narrator, Mike Daly, a defense attorney, some humor, but also a sense of honor and a sense of indignity when he sees things around him that he finds to be hypocritical or offensive. And if you work for an institution of any size, whether it's a law firm or, you know, any large institution, you tend to see a lot of different things, some of which are not as pleasant as others. And one of the things I think that works in the book that I worked very hard on was having Mike point out those little idiosyncrasies or inconsistencies in people's personalities, what they think, what they say. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about the sound of Mike's voice and how he doesn't suffer fools easily and how he pokes fun at people who are judgmental and pompous and institutions that are institutional, I guess, if you will.
Well, we've gotten a little easier since she wrote that book with the whole idea. As a matter of fact, this whole spring, I keep saying this, so people watch this program probably already bored with hearing me say this, but there's been, and I think it's a reaction to 9/11 to a great degree, because only now are books coming out that have been written since 9/11, since books aren't tabloid journalism. You know, it takes quite a while. But there's, most books that I've read in the last several months have all been about distrust or corruptions within those institutions that we should think of as our guardians or should be revering. I mean, it's, you know, the church, or it's the judicial system, or it's, you know, law firms, or it's the cops, or it's gotten to the point where all cops are somehow going to be bad in the book. All families, you don't ever feel good about parents at this point in a book. It's almost invariably going to be right now, because everybody's kind of geared up to it. It's always going to be about abusing trust, abusing children, abusing, you know, spouses. So all the things that we look to for so long to protect us and care for us. Right now, we're in a different, you know, we're not trusting them. And your book, I thought, came out before that, but was interesting about pillaring a law firm for all those things that are kind of horrifying to people who think a law firm, in fact, should be, you know, some sort of model of integrity and representing clients. And
yeah, I think it's very true that we're asking a lot more questions now, and I don't know if it's a post 9/11 issue, if it's the fact that there are, you know, 6 24-hour cable news channels whose jobs are to ask a lot of questions and hoping to break the big story or to get some dirt on, you know, somebody or something. But I think there's a level of questioning and mistrust, and I think perhaps post 9/11 we're more willing to ask the questions now. It is a bit disturbing at times, I think. It is of some concern because there seems to be a greater lack of trust in institutions. And then, you know, you factor in a recession, you factor in corporate scandals.
right, you've got Enron, you've got all kinds of things.